Emma never planned to steal anyone's life. But the moment she slipped into her roommate's dress, fate slipped into hers. When she walked into that glittering ballroom, nervous, invisible, unprepared, every instinct screamed she didn't belong. Yet all it took was one look, one man, one devastating misunderstanding. Because in that room full of wealth and whispers, Emma wasn't seen as a guest. She was seen as the millionaire's chosen bride. And in that single fragile moment, she understood something painful. Sometimes the world doesn't ask who you are. It decides for you. But what she didn't know was that wearing someone else's dress would force her to confront the very thing she'd spent her whole life avoiding, the truth of her own worth. Stay with me, because Emma's next step will change everything. Emma Larson stood frozen in front of the full-length mirror, a swirl of emerald green silk cascading down her frame in a way that felt entirely foreign. The dress was meant for someone else, her roommate Caroline, but tonight it was hers, at least for the few hours she would spend at the Clark family gala. The fabric shimmered under the soft glow of her bedroom lamp, and Emma couldn't help but run her fingers over it, tracing the intricate embroidery along the bodice. She wasn't supposed to be here, but here she was. The invitation lay on the mahogany dresser, gold foil lettering reflecting the lamplight. Mr. Benjamin Clark requests the pleasure of your company at the Grand Astoria Hotel, black tie. Emma picked it up again, reading the words for what felt like the 100th time. Her heart fluttered, a mix of excitement and panic. I can't do this, she whispered to herself, pressing her palms against the cool glass of the mirror. I'm not supposed to be anyone else tonight. Caroline had practically thrown the dress onto the bed 3 days ago, muttering about a last-minute assignment in New York and a family obligation she couldn't miss. You have to go in my place, Caroline had said, eyes wide with pleading urgency. It's just one night, Emma. You'll survive. Please, I can't let my mother throw a fit. Emma had laughed nervously when Caroline first asked. She was a freelance graphic designer used to living in jeans and oversized sweaters, not silk gowns and high heels. The idea of mingling with socialites, sipping champagne, and pretending to belong felt like stepping into someone else's dream, and she wasn't even sure it was her dream to begin with. Yet here she was, standing in Caroline's dress, staring at herself as if she were a stranger. Her reflection was almost unrecognizable. The emerald green clung to curves, Emma usually tucked away beneath layers of casual clothing. The slit at the side teased a leg she rarely showed, and her dark hair, normally pulled into a messy bun, fell in loose waves down her back. Thanks to 2 hours of curling iron practice and a few YouTube tutorials she had watched obsessively. The night before, Emma swallowed hard. The mirror reflected confidence she didn't feel. Who was this woman staring back at her? This is insane, she murmured, turning in a slow circle. The idea of entering that world, a world of wealth, power, and legacy, made her chest tighten. Every nerve screamed that she didn't belong, yet curiosity mingled with fear. She wanted to see it, experience it, even if only for a night. Caroline had reassured her before leaving for the airport. It's just a networking thing, she said, voice light but insistent. Rich people drinking expensive wine, pretending to care about art. You'll smile, nod, take a sip and leave. No one will notice. Caroline's optimism didn't ease Emma's nerves. The more she imagined the room filled with polished smiles and hidden judgments, the more Emma's stomach churned. Emma reached for the small clutch Caroline had left behind, checking once more for the invitation. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tucked it inside. She inhaled deeply, trying to summon courage, repeating to herself the phrase she had muttered dozens of times over the last few days. Just one night, you can do this. The taxi ride to the Grand Astoria felt unreal. Streets she had walked 1,000 times suddenly seemed alien, lined with limousines and luxury vehicles that gleamed under the city lights. Emma clutched the strap of her clutch tightly, heart hammering with each block they passed. She glanced at the driver, hoping for a reassuring smile that never came, and then at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman there seemed composed, confident, and ready, but Emma knew it was only a fragile mask. When the taxi stopped and she stepped onto the red carpet, the grandeur of the hotel struck her. Marble columns framed the entrance. A crystal canopy reflected hundreds of tiny lights, and valets in crisp uniforms held doors open with practiced ease. The sound of heels clicking against marble echoed in her ears, mingling with laughter and soft conversation that seemed impossibly sophisticated. Emma's palms were clammy, and yet a thrill ran through her. This was a world she had only glimpsed in magazines, in stories told by friends who had attended such events, and tonight she was inside it. Her eyes swept over the crowd, scanning for a quiet corner, a place to observe without drawing attention. But something or someone stopped her gaze. Across the room by the grand bar, a man watched her. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, with hair swept back just so he exuded a quiet command over the space. But it wasn't the suit or the height that held her attention, it was the intensity of his eyes. Dark, penetrating, and focused entirely on her, they made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way that unsettled her. Emma's breath caught. She had entered someone else's world, worn someone else's dress, and yet here she was, feeling the weight of being noticed in a way she had never experienced before. Her instinct was to shrink back, to melt into the crowd, but her feet remained rooted, caught between fear and fascination. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, though she didn't know whether it was for the man watching her or for herself. In that instant, Emma realized something. Despite the nerves, despite the uncertainty, she was here. She had crossed the threshold into a world she never expected to inhabit, wearing a gown that wasn't hers, facing a night she couldn't have planned for. "I'm not supposed to be here," she whispered, voice barely audible over the music, "but here I am." And in the pause that followed, with the hum of conversation around her and the glittering chandeliers above, she felt the first spark of possibility, a mixture of fear, excitement, and an unspoken question. What happens next? Emma Larson's heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she entered the Grand Astoria Hotel, each step echoing through the cavernous lobby. The space felt impossibly vast, gilded and glittering, as though every surface had been carefully polished to a mirror sheen, just to reflect her own trepidation. Chandeliers enormous and dripping, with crystals hung like suspended constellations, casting fractured light across velvet curtains and the sparkling marble staircase. Her breath caught in her throat, and she clenched her clutch tightly, wishing she could disappear into it. The smell of fresh flowers mingled with faint traces of expensive cologne and the subtle hint of something sweet baked into the marble floors. Soft classical music played from a discreet string quartet tucked into a corner, the violins and cello lending the air a sense of stately elegance that made Emma's pulse quicken. Guests passed by in a flurry of silk and tailored suits, laughing softly, their voices just above murmurs, carrying with them the scent of perfume and polished leather. Each pair of eyes that briefly glanced her way seemed to appraise her, catalog her, but never quite settle an invisible evaluation that made her stomach twist. She paused near a towering column, taking a moment to steady herself. Her reflection danced in the polished surface, emerald silk shimmering as she adjusted the strap of her clutch. Emma's mind raced. "You don't belong here. None of this is yours. You're just pretending." But as the words threatened to overwhelm her, she reminded herself, 1 hour, smile, survive, just stay calm. The grand staircase loomed to her left, velvet runners leading to balconies lined with glimmering glass railings where a few guests stood in muted conversation, champagne flutes catching the light. To her right, an endless hallway opened into a ballroom where crystal chandeliers reflected off golden drapes and marble pillars, bathing the polished floors in soft golden light. Emma could see clusters of elegantly dressed women in flowing gowns and men in tuxedos, the subtle shimmer of diamonds and cufflinks catching her eye at every turn. Her pulse quickened as she realized just how far from her ordinary life she had stepped. A maitre d' in a pristine black tailcoat approached, offering a polite nod. "Welcome, Miss Larson," he said smoothly, though Emma was certain he didn't know her at all. She forced a smile, replying in kind, though her voice sounded small and unsure even to her own ears. Every step she took deeper into the hotel seemed to make the world larger, grander, and more impossible. She tried to focus on her breathing, inhaling the scent of fresh roses and polished wood, and exhaling the fear coiling tight in her chest. The silk of her dress felt heavy, almost like armor, yet delicate enough to make her hyper-aware of every movement. She took in the other guests, laughter, the gentle clinking of champagne glasses, whispers of conversation in hushed, cultured tones. They were all so confident, so effortless, and here she was, a woman from a modest apartment navigating a world she had only glimpsed through magazines and secondhand stories. Her eyes wandered, scanning the room for a discreet corner, a place where she could observe without being observed when a movement caught her attention. Across the room near the grand bar he appeared. Benjamin Clark. The name had been mentioned repeatedly in the invitation's formal phrasing, but seeing him in person was entirely different. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered with hair neatly swept back, and a presence that seemed to command the space effortlessly. But it wasn't just his stature or attire, though his tailored tuxedo fit him as if made of light and shadow, it was the intensity of his gaze. Emma's breath hitched. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment time seemed to still. The room, the music, the glittering chandeliers, all of it faded, leaving only the piercing dark eyes of Benjamin Clark, assessing, acknowledging almost as if he could see through the carefully constructed exterior she was wearing tonight. Emma felt a jolt of something electric pass through her, a mingling of fear and fascination, and she instinctively took a small step back, though her heart betrayed her with a rapid flutter. A part of her screamed to flee, to hide somewhere in the marble corridors, to pretend she had never been here. But curiosity, that strange, insistent pulse, kept her rooted. She had never been looked at like that before, not really. Not with such intensity that made her feel visible, significant, and entirely exposed at the same time. Her mind raced, a million thoughts colliding. Who is he? Why does he look at me like that? What am I supposed to do now? She took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing herself to focus on her surroundings again, letting the music and chatter envelop with her. Her pulse slowly returned to a bearable rhythm, though the memory of that gaze lingered, settling somewhere deep in her chest. She adjusted her posture, reminding herself that this was just a party, just a few hours, and that she was here to help a friend. Still, a tiny, unbidden smile tugged at her lips. There was something thrilling, terrifying, and undeniably magnetic about this night. The soft murmur of conversation, the gentle clinking of glasses, the ambient glow of chandeliers all seemed to heighten her awareness. Every movement of Benjamin Clark's gaze was a challenge, and a question she couldn't yet answer. Emma felt herself teetering, between wanting to run and wanting to see, to understand, to somehow navigate this impossible glittering world with a borrowed identity draped over her like a second skin. A valet opened the door to a sleek black car outside, and the sound momentarily pulled her back to reality. Yet her eyes kept drifting back across the ballroom, catching Benjamin Clark, observing her from a distance, that inscrutable expression on his face. Emma shivered slightly, unsure if it was the chill in the air or the undeniable pull of being noticed, of being truly seen, even if under false pretenses. And so, standing amidst the glittering marble and the whispered laughter of the city's elite, Emma Larson realized she had crossed a threshold she could never undo. Every nerve in her body was alert, every instinct screaming caution, and yet beneath it all, a flicker of wonder had ignited. She wasn't supposed to be here, but she was. And for the first time that evening, she wondered what it would feel like to be truly understood, to be noticed not as someone else, but as herself. Emma Larson took a hesitant step further into the ballroom, clutching her small satin purse as though it were a lifeline. The warmth of the chandeliers contrasted sharply with the chill racing up her spine. Around her, laughter bubbled softly, mingling with the gentle strains of the string quartet, each note magnifying the enormity of the world she had entered. Every guest seemed poised, elegant, fluent in this language of refinement that Emma had never been taught. And she was improvising, holding on to borrowed poise as if it could shield her from discovery. She floated past clusters of conversing couples, offering smiles and nods, her heart hammering behind her ribs. The emerald silk gown seemed to transform her, forcing her posture into a straight-backed grace she wasn't accustomed to. Her fingers itched to smooth down the skirt to adjust the fabric, but she reminded herself to move with intention, letting the elegance appear natural, even as her nerves screamed otherwise. Emma's eyes scanned the room, catching glimpses of sparkling jewelry and polished shoes of champagne glasses catching the golden light like miniature stars. She tried to anchor herself, focusing on her breathing, slow inhale, slow exhale, smile, nod, sip, just survive the hour. No one will notice. But every time she repeated the mantra, her stomach knotted tighter. The thought of Caroline's mother, watchful, discerning, expecting perfection, hovered at the edge of her mind, adding pressure to an already delicate performance. A waiter glided past, offering a tray of flutes filled with sparkling liquid that gleamed as it caught the light. Emma accepted one, gripping it almost like a shield. The warmth of the glass was oddly comforting, a tangible anchor in the midst of swirling gowns and murmured conversation. She let her eyes wander to the grand staircase, imagining Caroline there, laughing with confidence she could only envy. The reality that she had no training for this world gnawed at her, a persistent reminder that any misstep might reveal her deception. As she moved toward a quieter corner, Emma overheard snippets of conversations about art auctions, philanthropy, and travel. Each word underscored how foreign she was here, a life measured in mansions, curated experiences, and networks she didn't belong to. She tried to nod politely, letting her lips curve into the practiced smile she had rehearsed in front of her bedroom mirror, but it felt fragile, like a delicate prop, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. Emma's eyes found a cluster of women discussing a recent charity gala. Their laughter was light, melodic, but carried an edge of scrutiny. She took a tentative step closer, offering a nod. One of them glanced briefly in her direction, raising an eyebrow ever so slightly, and Emma's heart jumped into her throat. They'll notice. They must see that I'm not me. She forced herself to swallow, clutching her purse a little tighter, and smiled again. The act felt increasingly like walking a tightrope, each step a careful calculation between confidence and fear. It was then that she felt a presence beside her, a shift in the air that seemed almost imperceptible at first. A shadow falling over her, the faint brush of someone's arm near hers, as a hand lightly adjusted a napkin on the nearby table. Emma's pulse leapt. She dared a glance upward, and there he was, Benjamin Clark. The same intense gaze from across the room, now close enough that she could see the subtle lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight curve of his mouth as if holding a secret amusement. Emma's breath hitched. He smiled. Not broadly, not in a manner that demanded attention, but a smile that seemed calibrated, mysterious, as though he were amused by something only he could understand. Her stomach lurched. Her carefully maintained composure teetered. He knows. He must know. But there was no accusation in that look, only curiosity and something more inscrutable, something that stirred a mix of fear and fascination deep inside her. Quite the evening, isn't it? His voice was low, smooth, deliberate, and Emma's ears seemed to tingle at the sound. She forced a nod, her lips parting to offer a polite, measured response, but her mind scrambled for words. Her heart pounded as she struggled to steady it. Every instinct screamed caution, but every fiber of her being was magnetized by his presence. She felt like a child caught trying to climb a tree that was far too tall, simultaneously thrilled and terrified. Benjamin stepped slightly closer, just enough for Emma to notice the warmth radiating from his tailored tuxedo, the faint scent of cedar wood and leather that seemed to wrap around her senses. Her fingers tightened on her purse, nails biting into the satin. She reminded herself, smile, nod, sip. Don't let him see you're nervous. Yet as he angled, his head tilting slightly as if considering her carefully, Emma realized the smile he had offered was not casual. It carried recognition, subtle and knowing, and it unsettled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The room around them blurred, the glittering chandeliers and murmuring guests fading into a soft haze. She was acutely aware of the proximity of the unspoken tension hovering between them, electric and delicate. Each small movement, the tilt of his chin, the flick of his eyes toward hers, felt magnified, amplified into something far greater than a casual glance. Emma's pulse thrummed against her temples. Every instinct to flee warred with the strange pull to stay, to engage, to see what this evening might hold. Her gaze dropped briefly to the flute of champagne in her hand, then back to his face. The corners of his lips twitched again, just enough to suggest a secret amusement, a knowing that seemed simultaneously inviting and elusive. Emma shivered imperceptibly. This is dangerous, she thought. And yet, I can't look away. The string quartet shifted into a softer piece, and for a moment the world seemed suspended. Emma adjusted her posture, smoothing the folds of her gown, inhaling deeply. She was playing the part, holding herself, as someone she was not. And yet, in the depth of that gaze, in the subtle smile that lingered, she sensed the possibility of something extraordinary, something that transcended the borrowed identity, the borrowed dress, the borrowed role she had stepped into. Tonight, and as Benjamin Clark lingered beside her, that enigmatic smile held, Emma Larson realized the night had only just begun, and she had no idea what she had stepped into. Emma Larson felt her pulse quicken as Benjamin Clark drew nearer, the soft hum of conversation around them fading into a muted backdrop. Each step he took seemed deliberate yet effortless, a fluid motion that contrasted sharply with the pounding of her own heart. She clutched her small clutch tighter, feeling the fabric of her emerald gown shift against her palm. Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity pulled her forward, magnetic and insistent. "Quite a night, isn't it?" he said again, his voice low and measured, almost conspiratorial, as if they shared a secret even before a word was exchanged. Emma managed a nod, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. She could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, her stomach fluttering with a mix of anxiety and something altogether foreign, anticipation, maybe even excitement. Benjamin's eyes didn't leave hers. There was a depth there, something that went beyond mere politeness or casual intrigue. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing, and it unnerved her. Emma's fingers tightened around her clutch, nails pressing into satin, grounding herself in a small, tangible reality. She tried to think of something witty, something smooth, anything to bridge the silence, but the words tangled in her throat. "You move through a room with remarkable ease," he observed, voice gentle but edged with amusement. "It's deceptive." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "Deceptive?" she asked, voice soft. He tilted his head slightly, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips, faint and knowing. "Yes, you look confident." And yet, he let the thought trail a delicate pause that drew her in. Emma felt an odd warmth spread through her chest, a sense of being both scrutinized and celebrated at the same time. She realized she was laughing softly, a nervous, high-pitched laugh that sounded like herself and not the composed persona she had imagined she would need tonight. And yet, what she prompted curiosity, prying her lips into a genuine smile this time. Benjamin's eyes softened just slightly, but the intensity never wavered. "And yet I can see it in you," he said, voice dropping, intimate and deliberate. "The uncertainty, the awareness that you're out of place." His gaze was unwavering, steady, and Emma felt as if the space between them was charged electric. Her stomach twisted. She had rehearsed this evening endlessly in her mind, how to appear poised, how to glide through conversations, how to smile politely and blend into the glittering crowd. But she had never rehearsed this, a man looking at her with an intensity that left her simultaneously thrilled and terrified, a strange mix of admiration and recognition that made her pulse race in ways she had never experienced. The quartet shifted to a slower, more intimate melody, the soft violin notes curling around them like a secret just for the two of them. Emma felt herself leaning just slightly forward, drawn into the gravity of Benjamin's presence. She became acutely aware of the subtle gestures, the tilt of his head, the soft brush of his hand near her elbow, as he adjusted the angle of a napkin on the nearby table. Each movement seemed deliberate yet fluid, a silent language that spoke more than words could. "I didn't expect to see anyone here tonight who surprised me," he said, voice just above a whisper, warm and steady. Emma's pulse quickened further, and she had to force herself to nod, her hands gripping the sides of her purse to keep from trembling. The sensation was dizzying, like standing at the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether to retreat or to leap. She felt a strange urge to confess everything, to spill the truth of her identity in a single breath, but the words remained lodged in her throat. "Not yet," she thought. "Just breathe, observe, survive the hour." Yet survival suddenly seemed secondary to the pull of his presence, the magnetic force that drew her gaze and refused to let her look away. Benjamin's eyes flickered with a subtle amusement, a knowingness that Emma couldn't quite place. "Would you join me for a walk?" he asked, his tone gentle but commanding, an invitation that felt as much a question as a declaration. The quiet elegance of his voice, the weight behind it, sent a shiver down her spine. Emma's mind raced. A walk, away from the crowd, alone with him. The possibilities surged and tangled: fear, excitement, curiosity, and the thrill of something entirely new, uncharted. She swallowed, nodding once almost imperceptibly, but that small gesture felt like surrendering to an invisible current. He offered his arm, subtle, nonchalant, yet the warmth of proximity made her heart hammer. Emma felt herself leaning slightly into his side as they moved through the crowd, the lights of the chandelier scattering across the polished marble floors. Each step felt surreal. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the whisper of silk and perfume, all seemed to dissolve into a haze around the quiet intensity between them. As they reached the far side of the ballroom, closer to a secluded terrace, Emma realized she had stopped thinking about how out of place she was, how fragile her borrowed persona seemed. Instead, her attention was wholly consumed by the man walking beside her, the strength in his stride, the subtle humor in his eyes, the way he seemed to see something genuine beneath the borrowed veneer she wore tonight. For the first time all evening, Emma felt the stirrings of trust, fragile yet undeniable. She wasn't sure where this walk would lead, but the pull was irresistible, magnetic. The world outside, the glittering, intimidating ballroom, faded into soft background noise as anticipation curled through her like a living thing. Benjamin Clark glanced at her, the corner of his mouth curving just slightly in that enigmatic smile, and Emma felt the electric tension of the evening coalesce into something almost tangible. The invitation was clear, silent, impossible to resist: a moment apart, a space just for them. And in that instant, standing amidst the soft golden light and hushed music, Emma Larson felt the night shift, subtle yet profound. Something new had begun, something she couldn't name, something that would change everything. The small, dimly lit restaurant felt worlds apart from the glittering chaos of the ballroom. Emma Larson slid into the corner booth, palms pressed against the cool leather seat as she tried to calm the storm of thoughts churning in her mind. The soft hum of conversation, clinking silverware, and the faint aroma of roasted herbs should have been comforting grounding, but instead it magnified the pounding of her heart. Each second stretched long, loaded with anticipation and dread. Across from her, Benjamin Clark adjusted the cuff of his crisp white shirt, his dark eyes fixed on her, with an intensity that made Emma feel both small and exposed. She took a shallow breath, reminding herself that this moment could not be avoided. The facade, the borrowed identity, the careful role she had played tonight, it was time to unravel it all. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, cumbersome, like lifting a stone from the depths of her chest. Benjamin tilted his head slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing his otherwise composed expression. Emma drew in another breath, steadying herself. "Last night, when we met at the gala, I wasn't who you thought I was." Her words faltered, trembling as they spilled into the air. "I'm not Caroline. I'm Emma Larson. She paused, swallowing hard. "I went in her place. She had an emergency in New York. And She exhaled shakily, searching his face, the words catching in her throat. Benjamin's gaze sharpened. The subtle warmth that had softened his earlier smile evaporated, replaced by a tense, guarded expression. "You lied to me," he said, flat-measured, but the edge in his voice was undeniable. Emma's stomach twisted violently. I didn't mean to," she began, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "I didn't know about the arrangement, about what was expected. I panicked and I let you believe." Her voice cracked, and she stopped, unable to finish the sentence, swallowed by the weight of her own confession. Benjamin's eyes narrowed, dark and piercing, and the silence that followed was almost unbearable. Emma felt the seconds stretch into eternity, the soft hum of the restaurant fading into a background drone as she waited for the verdict, her chest aching with guilt and fear. "You let me believe I was meeting someone else entirely," he said, voice low, controlled but tight with emotion. "And for what? Convenience? A favor for your friend?" The hurt in his eyes struck her like a physical blow. She had imagined many reactions: anger, disappointment, disbelief, but the raw sense of betrayal reflected in his gaze left her nearly breathless. It wasn't like that," Emma pleaded, her voice quivering. "Everything I told you, my work, my fears, the things I said on the dance floor, that was all real, just not my name, just not me." She pressed her palms against her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears. "I should have told you immediately." Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, jaw tight, the faint click of his fingers against the table punctuating the tense silence. "Do you know what it feels like?" His voice dropped almost a whisper, yet heavy with intensity. "To see someone and think you know them, and then realize it's all a facade." Emma nodded, heart sinking. She could feel the weight of his disappointment pressing down on her chest. I panicked," she admitted softly, eyes fixed on the tabletop. "I wasn't thinking. I wanted to survive the night, and I didn't want to ruin anything for Caroline, or for you." Her confession spilled out raw, unfiltered, revealing the vulnerability she had tried to hide behind a polished smile and borrowed identity. Benjamin leaned back slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. There was a flicker of something else there, now beneath the anger and hurt, a faint pull, a recognition of the truth in her words, the sincerity in her tremulous voice. "You're honest," he said, finally, the single word carrying weight tinged with both frustration and fascination. Emma's chest tightened. She had expected complete rejection, a severing of trust that would leave her stranded in the middle of this world she barely understood. Yet here he was, visibly conflicted, the tension between them palpable and almost magnetic. She lifted her eyes to meet his, and in that brief instant she saw the storm within him, a swirl of betrayal, surprise, and undeniable attraction. I don't know if I can forgive you," he murmured almost to himself, yet loud enough for her to hear. Emma swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of the moment. Every instinct screamed retreat, to beg for forgiveness, to explain further, but she held her ground, letting him feel the truth of her words, letting her sincerity speak louder than her fear. Benjamin's fingers drummed lightly against the table, a subtle rhythm that belied his otherwise composed exterior. "You've put me in an impossible position," he said finally, dark eyes fixed on hers. "But I can't deny this pull, this connection, even now." Emma's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze, the mixture of anger and intrigue, made her heart flutter wildly. She realized almost in disbelief that despite the deception, despite the hurt, she was still standing in a space that he hadn't abandoned. "Would you come with me?" he asked, suddenly a flicker of vulnerability beneath his commanding tone. "Somewhere quieter. We need to talk, away from everyone." His invitation carried a subtle authority, but also a trace of something softer: curiosity, desire, and an unspoken willingness to see beyond the facade she had worn. Emma's mind raced. To follow him now would be to step further into unknown territory, to confront the consequences of her deception head-on. Fear clawed at her, warning her of the risks, the humiliation, the possible rejection. Yet beneath that fear, a thrill of possibility surged. This was her chance to reclaim truth, to show who she really was, even if it meant facing anger, disappointment, and the unknown. She nodded, a small, deliberate gesture, allowing herself a fragile spark of courage to blossom. Benjamin's lips curved in the slightest of smiles, enigmatic, dangerous, compelling, and Emma felt the pull of the night deepen, the threads of connection weaving between them more tightly than ever. And as they rose from the booth, stepping together toward the quiet corner, Benjamin had indicated Emma Larson realized that nothing tonight would ever be simple again. The night had turned sharp and uncertain, and yet, somehow, irresistible. The taxi ride back to her modest apartment felt surreal, the city lights blurring past the window like streaks of liquid gold against the inky night. Emma Larson pressed her forehead to the cool glass, letting the hum of the engine and the distant honks of traffic fill the silence around her. The conversation at the restaurant replayed endlessly in her mind. The confession, Benjamin's controlled anger, and yet that glimmer of intrigue that she couldn't quite place. She felt exposed, raw, vulnerable in ways she hadn't expected. Entering her apartment, Emma paused just inside the door, letting the familiar scent of worn carpet and brewed coffee wash over her. The contrast between the grandeur of the Grand Astoria and the modest familiarity of her own space was jarring. Everything here was simple, practical, her work sketches scattered across the living room, a stack of art magazines on the coffee table, a single potted plant in the corner. Here she was undeniably herself, and yet that truth carried a weight heavier than any borrowed gown or glittering ballroom. She sank into the couch, pulling her knees up, and let the events of the evening settle around her like a storm. What had she done? She had confessed everything, peeled back the layers of deceit, and yet she was left with the gnawing uncertainty of Benjamin Clark's reaction. Would he despise her for the deception, or was there truly something in the honesty of her heart that had held him even briefly in fascination? Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the edge of a sketchbook, the paper worn from long hours of drawing and design. She reflected on the past 24 hours, the swirl of emotions and missteps that had led to this moment. Emma's mind felt like a battlefield, pride and guilt, fear and hope all clashing in relentless waves. Was she worthy of this world? Of him, she asked herself silently. The question reverberated through her chest with each shallow breath. Outside the city continued its indifferent rhythm, distant sirens, the hum of passing cars, the occasional bark of a dog, but within her apartment silence reigned. Emma felt the solitude press against her, a mirror to the uncertainty inside. She thought of Benjamin's eyes, that fleeting smile that had both unsettled and captivated her, and wondered whether the attraction he felt was real or merely a reflection of curiosity, of amusement at the unexpected twist she had provided in his night. The phone on the coffee table vibrated suddenly, breaking the hush like a pulse through her chest. Emma's hands shook as she picked it up, expecting perhaps a message from Caroline, words of reassurance or playful reprimand, but instead her breath caught at the name on the screen. Benjamin Clark. Her thumb hovered over the screen, hesitant heart hammering like a drum in her chest. With a trembling swipe, she opened the message. "I can't stop thinking about you tonight. Are you safe? Can we talk tomorrow?" Emma blinked, her mind spinning. Relief and exhilaration surged through her veins, but alongside it came a creeping doubt. After everything, can I trust this? Does he still like me, or am I just a convenient curiosity? Her fingers hovered over the reply button, the cursor blinking at her with impatient insistence. She wanted to respond immediately, to pour out the swirling emotions trapped in her chest, but caution held her back. She sank back into the couch, phone resting against her palm, feeling the weight of the moment press down. The night had been a tempest of glamour, fear, and confession, and now alone the consequences of her choices settled in fully. Emma felt the sharp sting of vulnerability, the raw edge of exposure that comes with revealing truth. She had laid herself bare, confessed her deception, and now had only the uncertain promise of his words to hold on to. Her thoughts drifted to the life outside these walls, the familiar routines, the simplicity of her apartment, the hum of creativity in her quiet home. Could she truly navigate the complexities of Benjamin's world while remaining herself? Could she withstand scrutiny, judgment, and expectations that she had never faced before? The questions circled endlessly, gnawing at the edges of her courage. Emma pressed the phone to her chest, letting the warmth of the device mimic the reassuring presence she longed for. The message shimmered on the screen, a tangible reminder that he had reached across the divide she had created, that he was still here, still interested, and yet still enigmatic. The tension was almost unbearable, hope and fear entwined in a tight knot pulling at her chest and stomach. She closed her eyes, letting her breath come slow and deliberate, trying to center herself. "I did the right thing," she whispered into the quiet room. "I told the truth, but am I enough?" The question lingered like a shadow, the echo of her own insecurities whispering through the empty apartment. The phone buzzed again, a new message from him: "Sleep if you can. I'll be thinking of you." Emma's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. Relief fought with suspicion, excitement mingled with fear. She pressed the phone to her chest, feeling the faint pulse of possibility, and yet couldn't shake the lingering worry after tonight, after the confession, after everything. Was this the beginning of something real, or a fragile illusion that would shatter with the morning light? She lay back against the couch, curling into herself, the emerald silk dress still draped over the chair beside her, a silent reminder of the night's chaotic magic. The city outside pulsed with life, indifferent and vast, while Emma Larson stared at the ceiling, chest tight with longing and apprehension. She couldn't know what tomorrow would bring, couldn't know if Benjamin's intrigue would survive the revelation, couldn't know if her heart had overstepped the bounds of reason, yet the tiny flicker of warmth from his messages held a fragile promise, delicate and electrifying. Emma traced the glowing screen with her fingertips, heart racing, mind spinning with anticipation and doubt. Somewhere between fear and hope, she allowed herself a single shaky thought: maybe this wasn't over. And as the city lights danced across the walls of her quiet apartment, Emma Larson remained there, caught between anxiety and wonder, her fingers lingering over the phone, waiting for a sign that the night's turbulence might yet lead to something extraordinary. The next morning, Emma Larson woke to a quiet apartment, but the calm was deceptive. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a tiny drumbeat of escalating tension. She picked it up with trepidation, scrolling through news alerts, social media tags, and direct messages from friends and strangers alike. The headlines were unavoidable: Millionaire's mystery woman, who is Emma Larson, and the gala scandal, a case of mistaken identity or something more. Emma sank onto her couch, the faint scent of brewed coffee filling the air, and let the weight of it all press down on her. The green silk dress from the gala hung limply over a chair, its elegance now a symbol of the chaos she had stepped into. She had anticipated a bit of chatter, perhaps a few whispered comments, but the intensity of public scrutiny was suffocating. Every click, every share seemed to amplify her insecurities, reminding her of the stark contrast between her modest life and Benjamin Clark's gilded world. Messages poured in from friends and acquaintances, some curious, some judgmental. "Are you really with him? Did you trick him? Wow, didn't see that coming?" Each ping was like a small jab, a reminder that she was being examined under the unyielding gaze of a society that had already decided its verdict. Emma felt exposed, cornered, in a world she barely knew how to navigate. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Benjamin. She hesitated before opening it, bracing herself for a cold reprimand or a sign that he was withdrawing. Instead, the words made her chest ache with relief and a flicker of hope. "Ignore them. I know who you are, and that's all that matters to me. I'll handle the rest." A shiver of gratitude coursed through her. Benjamin had not only reached across the chasm created by her confession, but had planted himself firmly on her side, ready to shield her from the storm. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of being seen not as a subject of gossip, not as a scandalous story, but as a person worthy of protection and respect. The day passed in a blur of news articles and social media updates. Every time she looked away for a moment, a new post appeared, dissecting her appearance, her background, and the audacity or naivety of her choice to attend the gala in Caroline's place. Emma felt the sting of judgment, the pangs of self-doubt sharpening with each passing hour. She wondered if she had overstepped, if her intrusion into Benjamin's world would prove irreparable. By late afternoon, a subtle anxiety had settled over her, heavy and relentless. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a cup of tea, eyes fixed on the tiny steam spiraling upward. The weight of public scrutiny and private apprehension seemed impossible to bear alone. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from Benjamin. "I'm on my way. We're not letting them decide our story. I want to see you." Emma's chest tightened, a mix of relief and anticipation knotting her stomach. Within minutes there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find him standing there, the same calm, commanding presence she had come to rely upon, yet now carrying an air of determination and protectiveness that left her momentarily breathless. He stepped inside, the warmth of his presence enveloping her immediately. "Emma," he said softly, taking her hand in his, "don't let any of it define you. You're not their story to judge. You're mine to know." His gaze was unwavering, firm in its conviction, and Emma felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of being seen, understood, and defended. They sat together on the couch, side by side, hands intertwined, the soft murmur of the city outside their window fading into the background. Benjamin's presence was a bulwark against the swirling criticisms, a tangible reminder that she wasn't alone in facing the storm. He spoke gently, guiding her through the anxiety, reminding her of her worth, of her honesty, and of the courage it had taken to step into an unfamiliar world with nothing but authenticity and integrity. Emma listened, heart swelling and tightening all at once. The storm of public opinion still raged, but the tension shifted from being purely external to something they could face together. Benjamin's support was a shield, his assertion of her worth a lifeline. The whispering judgments of the world began to feel smaller, less threatening, as if the gravity of their connection counteracted every sneer and speculative glance. Later, when he left to handle a few matters at the office, Benjamin's parting words echoed in her ears. "We'll navigate this together, always on the same side." Emma felt a weight lift slightly, the knot of anxiety in her chest, loosening, replaced by a fragile, tentative hope. She realized that this was no longer just about surviving a night of mistaken identity or facing the glare of society. It was about trust, alignment, and the willingness of someone remarkable to stand beside her unequivocally. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Emma Larson sat by her window, the gentle breeze stirring the hem of her modest dress. She stared out at the city, watching the lights flicker to life, a reflection of the chaos and beauty of the night she had endured. The world had judged her, speculated about her motives, and questioned her worth, but she had someone in her corner who believed in her. And in that quiet, suspended moment, Emma felt the faint stirrings of confidence tinged with lingering fear. The storm outside would not relent easily, but the storm within her had a new anchor. Benjamin Clark had drawn a line in the sand, choosing her openly, defiantly, and Emma felt for the first time in hours that she might just be able to weather whatever came next. Yet as darkness settled over the city, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows across her floor, Emma's mind raced with the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. The whispers, the headlines, the scrutiny, they were not over. But she pressed her hands together, holding on to the warmth of his words and the firmness of his promise, and allowed herself a fragile, tentative belief that perhaps, just perhaps, they could face the world together. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the curtains of Emma Larson's apartment, painting warm streaks across the familiar clutter of her living space. The events of the past few days still lingered in her mind, but today felt different, lighter, charged with the quiet possibility of something ordinary, something real. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter, and she smiled when she saw Benjamin Clark's message. "Ready for our adventure, jeans acceptable." By noon, they were wandering together through a bustling food truck festival on the city's riverfront. Emma couldn't help but laugh as the aroma of sizzling meats and spices mingled with the tang of the river breeze. The crowd moved around them in a casual chaos, strangers brushing past children laughing, musicians strumming on small stages. For the first time in days, Emma felt herself breathe without the tension of expectation pressing on her chest. Benjamin was at her side, surprisingly relaxed. Gone was the sharp formality of the gala, replaced by a casual ease that seemed almost playful. He wore dark jeans and a soft Henley shirt, the sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms, dusted with light hair, the same hands that had gripped hers with such intensity at the restaurant, now comfortably stealing bites from her taco without asking. Emma couldn't stop the smile spreading across her face. "This is different," she said, gesturing at the food trucks with a laugh. "No crystal flutes, no string quartet, just tacos and questionable grilled cheese sandwiches." Benjamin grinned, taking a bite of a Korean-style taco. "Different is good. sometimes better. Besides, it's you I'm here with, not the ambiance." His eyes sparkled with humor, but there was a softness there too, a glimpse of the man behind the CEO persona. Emma's chest warmed unexpectedly. She felt a fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with the spicy sauce. As they meandered through the festival, sampling dumplings, empanadas, and the odd dessert taco, their conversation drifted from work and mundane details to stories of childhood misadventures, favorite movies, and shared moments of embarrassment that left them both laughing so hard their sides ached. Emma felt a rare freedom in her laughter, the kind that comes when someone sees you fully without judgment or expectation. After the festival, they made their way to a small pottery studio tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The scent of clay and water filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Emma had always loved working with her hands, the tactile connection between thought and creation, grounding her in ways words never could. She was surprised to find Benjamin genuinely intrigued, eager to attempt the spinning wheel beside her. "You attack that clay like it owes you money," she teased, watching him scowl at a lopsided bowl he had shaped with uncharacteristic fervor. "It's resistant," he replied, voice mock serious, hands coated in wet gray slip. "And it has opinions." Emma laughed, a rich, unrestrained sound that drew a faint smile from him. She realized that this moment, this simple, ordinary activity was revealing layers of him she hadn't anticipated. The man who commanded boardrooms, whose very name carried weight and expectation, was here fumbling with clay, laughing at his mistakes, and engaging fully with the world in a way that felt authentic and human. By the time their creations were done, uneven and lopsided as they were, Emma couldn't stop grinning. Benjamin held up his bowl like a proud child, and she clapped her hands in mock admiration. "A masterpiece," she declared. "Truly, the stuff of legends." He laughed, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "Only because I had the right teacher." There was a tenderness in his tone, the kind that made her feel noticed and cherished beyond the roles they had played for others. As they left the studio, walking slowly through the quiet streets back toward her apartment, Emma felt a sudden surge of realization. Benjamin Clark was more than the headlines, more than the CEO reputation, more than the expectations of society. He was human, funny, vulnerable, attentive, and capable of joy that wasn't dictated by business strategies or public perception. He saw her not as a story, not as a distraction, but as a person. Her mind raced with this revelation, the pulse of her heart quickening as she glanced at him. "He laughed at something," she said, a low, genuine chuckle that made her feel as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them. A simple gesture, a hand brushing against hers as they walked, sent a thrill through her that was more potent than any luxury she had witnessed in a ballroom. They stopped at a quiet overlook, the city sprawled beneath them like a constellation of lights, distant and beautiful. Emma leaned against the railing's shoulders, brushing his, the warmth of his presence steadying her. Benjamin's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, a silent affirmation that whatever chaos and judgment awaited them, they were navigating it together. "You're different than I imagined," she admitted softly, voice almost lost in the hum of the city. "Not the man on the covers, not the one everyone talks about. You're this," she said, gesturing between them, "this ordinary, extraordinary person." He turned slightly, the corners of his mouth, lifting eyes reflecting a softness that was almost disarming. "And you're nothing like I expected either," he replied, voice low, earnest. "Not just Caroline, not just the image of the gala, you, Emma Larson, real messy, brilliant, and utterly captivating." Her chest tightened at his words, warmth and wonder flooding through her. The realization hit her fully. They were connecting not through appearances, titles, or expectations, but through the authenticity of who they truly were. In that moment, the glittering world of social scrutiny, of whispered speculation, of borrowed identities, seemed to fade into insignificance. Emma Larson let herself smile, a deep, contented smile, as the cool night air swept across the overlook. The mini-climax of the day had arrived, not in drama, not in revelation, but in quiet understanding. Benjamin Clark was real, and he was hers to know, and perhaps finally, she was his too. Yet as they stood there, hand in hand, watching the city breathe beneath them, a flicker of apprehension lingered. The world outside the overlook was still unpredictable, the headlines relentless, and tomorrow would demand courage anew. But for this brief, suspended moment, Emma allowed herself to feel warmth, connection, and the fragile magic of ordinary happiness. The soft hum of the city outside Emma Larson's apartment was a distant murmur compared to the quiet intimacy that settled between her and Benjamin Clark. They sat close on the couch, legs brushing coffee mugs, warming their hands. The night air had cooled slightly, and the faint scent of vanilla from a candle flickered across the room. It was a rare moment without the glare of public scrutiny, without the endless tick of expectations or whispered judgments. For the first time since the gala, Emma felt she could breathe without holding herself in constant check. "I've never really told anyone this." Emma began, her voice low, almost hesitant, as if each word carried weight too heavy to release. Benjamin tilted his head, giving her space, his dark eyes soft but attentive. She took a deep breath and began tracing the path of her past, starting with the small apartment she had grown up in, the long hours she spent working multiple jobs to afford art supplies, the quiet encouragements from teachers who believed in her and the voices that dismissed art as impractical. Each memory seemed to settle around her like a fragile cloak of vulnerability. Benjamin listened without interruption, nodding subtly, his gaze never leaving hers. In the gentle pause between her sentences, Emma felt her guard slowly lowering. She spoke of the scholarship that had changed her trajectory, the imposter syndrome that haunted her in every room of privilege she entered, and the sacrifices her single mother had made so she could dream beyond the limitations of their every quarter circumstances. Her words trembled at times, but they carried authenticity, raw, unadorned, and fiercely human. "I guess I've always felt like I needed to prove I belonged," she admitted, finally staring at her hands folded in her lap. "Even when I shouldn't have to. Even when I was enough on my own." Her voice broke slightly, and Benjamin reached out, his hand covering hers, grounding her with quiet certainty. "You are enough," he said softly, voice low and steady, carrying the weight of conviction that Emma had not anticipated. She looked up, startled at the depth in his gaze, feeling the sincerity in every syllable. Benjamin leaned back slightly, taking a sip of his coffee before speaking. "I've never really opened up like this either," he admitted, his usual calm, commanding presence softened by the intimacy of the moment. "Running Steel Industries has been consuming. Expectations, deadlines, legacy. There's never been space for the personal. It's like I've been performing a role my whole life, always calculated, always measured, until now." Emma felt her heart tighten. She had assumed his world was unattainable, a series of carefully constructed walls behind which he hid. But now she saw cracks, glimpses of vulnerability that mirrored her own. The man who had seemed so composed, so untouchable, was revealing himself flawed, human, yet unafraid to show depth. "I've spent years following paths others set for me," Benjamin continued, voice dropping to a whisper almost conspiratorial. "Building a company my father left behind, keeping up appearances, making choices that were right for the business, not necessarily right for me. And then, you walked in. Everything changed." His eyes softened, and Emma felt a warmth she could not articulate blooming in her chest. He paused, reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face, fingers lingering with delicate precision. "I saw you last night, and I realized something. Amid all the pretense, the expectations and the missteps, you were real. Completely, undeniably real." His words hung between them, fragile and potent, wrapping around her heart like a gentle embrace. Emma swallowed, hard eyes glistening, a quiet laugh escaping her. "I've never been good at being anything but myself," she admitted. "And sometimes that's terrifying. Especially around people like you, people with everything figured out." Benjamin's lips curved in the faintest of smiles, a softness that transformed the lines of his face. "And yet," he said, voice low, deliberate, "that's exactly why I can't look away. You are the painting I don't want to walk away from." The words struck Emma like a gentle thunderclap, the imagery embedding itself deep in her chest. She blinked, heart hammering, feeling the weight of them sink in. In a world where judgment had shadowed every step, where appearances dictated worth, Benjamin Clark had chosen to see her not as a mistake, not as a headline, not as a borrowed identity, but as Emma Larson. Her entire being, flawed and perfect in equal measure, was enough to hold his attention, his admiration, and something far deeper than either had anticipated. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, unbidden, as the gravity of his confession settled over her. She had spent hours questioning her own worth, doubting whether she deserved connection, affection, or acceptance. And here, in the quiet intimacy of a dimly lit apartment, Benjamin Clark's honesty bridged the chasm of her insecurities, offering trust, admiration, and a promise of acceptance. Emma reached out, placing her hand over his, squeezing gently. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Except, thank you for seeing me, for choosing to see me." Benjamin shook his head slightly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You don't have to say anything," he replied softly. "Just let this moment exist." Let us exist together without pretense, without expectations. They sat in silence for a long moment, hearts beating in tandem, the quiet of the room wrapping around them like a cocoon. The weight of the world, the scrutiny, and the previous night's chaos faded into insignificance as trust and vulnerability entwined, creating a fragile but unbreakable bond. Emma Larson finally exhaled, fully releasing a tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For the first time since the gala, she felt a semblance of balance, courage tempered by care, truth met with understanding, and vulnerability met with acceptance. The mini-climax of the evening had arrived not through drama or confrontation, but through recognition, the acknowledgement that two souls equally flawed and striving had chosen to see and honor one another. Yet, as the city outside thrummed with life, Emma couldn't help but feel the faint edge of anxiety. The world would still test them, the scrutiny would still bite, and the path ahead would not be without obstacles. But for this moment suspended between confession and reassurance, between fear and hope, Emma allowed herself to feel a deep, resonant connection, a bond that had been built not on grandeur, not on appearances, but on the quiet courage to reveal one's true self. Emma Larson woke to another day drenched in uncertainty. The morning light filtered through her curtains, casting a soft glow over her apartment, but the warmth was fleeting against the cold, persistent buzz of notifications. Her phone vibrated incessantly, a chorus of messages, emails, and social media alerts that threatened to drown her in scrutiny. Headlines sprawled across screens, variations of the same story repeated with subtle differences, all focusing on her relationship with Benjamin Clark. Millionaire's mystery woman, fact or fiction? Emma Larson intruder in a billionaire's world, from unknown artist to society sensation, the Clark connection. Emma sat on her couch, coffee mug in hand, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down from every angle. Each article dissected her appearance, her modest apartment, and even her past, weaving a narrative that made her feel exposed, like a character caught in someone else's story. She had expected scrutiny, yes, but the relentlessness of it, the judgment from strangers, the whispers in her own social circles, was exhausting. As she scrolled through comments, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Do I even belong here? She wondered, silently gripping the mug until her knuckles turned white. Doubt crept into her mind, insidious and persistent. Was she truly worthy of Benjamin's attention? Could she maintain authenticity under the glare of public expectation? Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from Benjamin. I know they're loud. I see you. I believe in you. We face this together. Emma exhaled sharply, a mixture of relief and lingering apprehension swirling in her chest. She knew he was right, she wasn't alone, but the public spotlight felt unrelenting, as if every glance and comment was a test she might fail. The tension between her desire for normalcy and the reality of Benjamin's world made each decision, each interaction, fraught with stakes she had never encountered before. Later that afternoon, they met in a quiet cafe near the riverfront. Benjamin arrived, first dressed casually, yet impeccably, and his expression was calm but alert, as if anticipating every possible ripple in the social tide. Emma walked in, nerves prickling at her spine, and their eyes met across the room. The brief smile he offered was reassuring, a silent promise that whatever storms came, they would face them side by side. They sat together, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to fade. The hum of conversations and clinking cups became background noise, allowing a fragile bubble of normalcy to form around them. But the quiet was deceptive. Emma knew the external pressures were never far away. Her phone, placed face down on the table, remained a ticking reminder that judgment lurked beyond the walls of this temporary sanctuary. Emma, Benjamin began, voice low and steady. I know it's hard. I know people will question everything us you this connection. But I want you to remember something. You're not alone in this. Not now, not ever. Emma looked up, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. I know, but it's so relentless. Every headline, every comment, it feels like they're trying to dismantle everything we've built in a day. Benjamin reached across the table, his hand covering hers with a firmness that grounded her. Let them talk, he said quietly but with unmistakable authority. Their opinions don't define you, and they don't define us. We decide what matters together. Do you understand? A swell of emotion rose in Emma's chest, a mixture of gratitude and awe. His confidence, his unwavering support, fortified her in ways she hadn't realized she needed. The world outside could rage, the judgments could fly, but here in this moment they were a team, an alliance bound by trust and genuine affection. As they spoke, Benjamin detailed a plan to mitigate the scrutiny, careful statements to the press, strategic appearances, and a united front that made it clear their relationship was built on authenticity, not spectacle. Each word was deliberate, thoughtful, protective. Emma felt her tension ebb slightly, replaced by a cautious optimism. He wasn't just shielding her, he was asserting their right to define their narrative, and in doing so, he made her feel valued, seen, and supported. By evening, the news cycle had intensified. Social media buzzed with speculation, some favorable, much critical, but Emma found herself less shaken than she had anticipated. Benjamin's presence was a stabilizing force, a reminder that amid the noise they had a shared reality anchored in trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Walking back from the cafe, hands intertwined, Emma realized the mini-climax of the day had arrived, not in the media storm, not in public declarations, but in the private, steady affirmation that they were a unit capable of weathering the external chaos. Benjamin's protective stance, his unwavering support, was a testament to the strength of their bond. Yet even in the comfort of his reassurance, a flicker of doubt lingered at the edges of her mind. The world beyond their small, intertwined space remained unpredictable. There would be more headlines, more gossip, more tests of their patience and resilience. But, with Benjamin at her side, Emma felt a renewed determination, a quiet courage that allowed her to face each challenge without crumbling under the weight of expectation. The city lights twinkled as they turned the corner toward her apartment, and Emma felt a fragile sense of balance returning. The storm was far from over, but she no longer felt powerless. Together they would navigate the scrutiny, confront the whispers, and uphold the truth of their connection. For the first time in days, Emma allowed herself to imagine a path forward, one in which their trust, commitment, and shared vulnerability could withstand the pressures of the outside world. She exhaled softly, leaning slightly against him as they paused at the crosswalk. Benjamin's hand tightened around hers, reassuring and steady. In that simple gesture, Emma felt the enormity of his promise. He would stand with her, shield her, and choose her above the clamor of public opinion. And as they continued their walk home side by side, she realized that whatever challenges awaited, they were no longer facing them alone. The morning sun filtered through the wide windows of Benjamin Clark's penthouse, spilling golden light across the hardwood floors and illuminating the carefully curated chaos of their shared breakfast preparations. Emma Larson moved with deliberate care, hands coated in flour as she kneaded dough for pancakes, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and her favorite sweater slightly smudged with remnants of chocolate from the previous night. The world outside might be loud, intrusive, and unrelenting, but here, in the quiet warmth of Benjamin's kitchen, life felt simple, ordinary, and entirely their own. Benjamin leaned against the counter, a mug of coffee cradled in his hands, watching her with a soft smile. He was dressed in a well-worn t-shirt and sweatpants, a stark contrast to the crisp suits and polished exterior the world associated with his name. The contrast itself made Emma smile. Here, stripped of public expectation and social scrutiny, he was just Benjamin, human, relaxed, a presence she could exist around without pretense. "You know," he said, voice low and teasing, "your pancake technique is unconventional." Emma laughed, a warm, airy sound that filled the kitchen. "Unconventional, they're fluffy, not rocket science. At least I think they are." She flipped a pancake with a flourish that sent a slight arc of batter onto the counter. Benjamin reached over with a napkin, dabbing at the mess with exaggerated care. "You're creating chaos and calling it breakfast," he teased, though the twinkle in his eye betrayed genuine amusement. The room was filled with the aroma of sizzling butter and sweet maple syrup, an olfactory reminder that life, despite its complications and expectations, could still hold moments of pure, unadulterated joy. They moved through the kitchen in easy rhythm, a silent dance of familiarity and trust, each action harmonizing with the other. Emma felt a rare lightness in her chest, a sense of ease that had been absent in the whirlwind of headlines, gossip, and public scrutiny. After breakfast, they moved to the living room where Benjamin had gathered several small, colorful throw pillows. Emma picked one up, turning it over in her hands, appreciating the whimsical design of a cat wearing sunglasses. "This one is non-negotiable," she declared. Benjamin chuckled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "You're slowly turning this place into your own," he observed, a soft smile touching his lips. "But I have to admit, I like it." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at the admission. They wandered through the apartment together, adding pillows, rearranging chairs, and finding small spots to hang artwork. Every mundane act felt infused with intimacy, a testament to their growing bond. These were the moments no headline could capture, no social commentary could diminish. In these quiet rituals, Emma felt the security and authenticity she had longed for, a sanctuary from the relentless gaze of the outside world. Later, they settled onto the couch, mugs of tea in hand, the city's distant hum, a gentle lull beneath their conversation. They spoke in easy tones about the future, not the high-pressure, business-oriented future the world assumed for Benjamin, but the simple human possibilities they hoped to share. Vacations to quiet towns, Sunday mornings lingering over coffee, evenings spent exploring small art galleries or attempting new recipes together. Emma found herself imagining these scenarios vividly, her mind painting a canvas of ordinary happiness colored with laughter, comfort, and companionship. Benjamin listened, genuinely engaged, asking questions and offering suggestions, but never imposing or overshadowing. The attentiveness, the respect, the willingness to include her vision alongside his own made Emma feel cherished in a way that transcended words. It wasn't just about the activities themselves, it was the shared presence, the understanding that they could inhabit these simple moments together, without pretense, without calculation, without the constant pressure of public opinion. At one point, Benjamin reached over, taking her hand in his. "You know," he said softly, "these little things, they're important. More than any gala, any headline, any expectation. It's here in this quiet that I feel the real weight of us." Emma's chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice. She turned slightly to look at him, meeting his gaze. The soft curve of his lips, the warmth in his eyes, the subtle tension of his hand holding hers, all spoke of a connection that was grounded, tangible, and entirely mutual. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to fully inhabit the moment, to let go of doubt and fear, and to feel a profound sense of alignment. They spent the afternoon exploring the city on foot, wandering into a small gallery where local artists displayed their work. Benjamin lingered at each piece with genuine curiosity, asking questions that revealed an appreciation for creativity that transcended his corporate persona. Emma explained her interpretations, sharing insights into the techniques and inspirations behind the art, and for each moment he listened with unhurried attention, validating her thoughts, her opinions, and her very presence in his world. As they stepped back onto the bustling streets, Emma felt a profound sense of harmony. The city noise, the people moving past the ordinary chaos of urban life, it all felt secondary to the simplicity of their shared laughter, their whispered conversations, and the gentle, persistent reassurance that they belonged together in this space, no matter what the world might think. Mini climax of the day arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, but with a force that made Emma's chest swell with contentment. It was not in drama, nor in revelation, nor in grandeur. It was in the rhythm of shared mundane life, in the ease of being present with someone who saw her, fully embraced her imperfections, and made her feel completely unequivocally at home. In that fleeting suspended moment, Emma realized she and Benjamin had found a rare equilibrium, a union of ordinary lives made extraordinary by mutual trust, affection, and understanding. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the apartment in soft amber light, Emma Larson rested her head against Benjamin's shoulder, letting herself simply be. The warmth, the intimacy, the laughter, they formed a quiet promise of days yet to come, a tether between them that whispered of belonging, of partnership, and of the quiet, enduring magic of shared everyday moments. The city lights outside Benjamin Clark's penthouse glimmered like a constellation scattered across the river, reflecting a million possibilities, but none as vivid as the one unfolding inside. Emma Larson stood near the window, wrapped in a soft throw, coffee cooling in her hands, her thoughts a tangle of excitement and apprehension. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, from the exhilaration of their first meetings to the quiet intimacy of shared mornings, yet tonight felt pivotal, charged with a gravity that made her heart race. Benjamin approached his footsteps, silent on the polished hardwood. He paused behind her, the warmth radiating from his presence seeping into her skin. "Emma," he said softly, voice deliberate, "I've been thinking a lot. About us, about everything that's happened." She turned slightly, meeting his gaze. The depth in his eyes, the sincerity stripped away any residual doubt she had harbored. Her pulse quickened as she sensed the tension and tenderness coiled in the moment something monumental was about to shift. "I know the world expects a lot from both of us," Benjamin continued, stepping closer. "Expectations, scrutiny, the constant pressure to conform. But in all of that, I realized something essential. It's not about the headlines, or the status, or the expectations. It's about you and me. Emma's breath caught. The words were familiar in their simplicity, yet monumental in implication. She felt a flutter of anticipation, her chest tightening, as every nerve seemed to awaken to the possibility that tonight could redefine everything. "I don't want to pretend anymore," Benjamin said, voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want a life dictated by appearances, by pressure, by what everyone else thinks we should be. I want us, all of us. Every morning, every ordinary, extraordinary moment." Emma's lips parted, but no words came. She felt a tremor of hope and fear mingle in her stomach. The weight of reality pressed against the possibility of a future she had longed for but hesitated to imagine. Could she truly step into his world without losing herself? Could they navigate the inevitable scrutiny together and emerge unbroken? Benjamin extended his hand toward her, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to move in with me," he said simply, yet with a gravity that made the declaration feel monumental. "Not because of the apartment, not because of the lifestyle, but because I want us to face life together, to share every ordinary and extraordinary moment as partners, as equals." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, caught between disbelief and overwhelming emotion. The very idea that the man she admired, the man who had seemed untouchable and distant, wanted her, not a version of her constructed for appearances, but Emma Larson, whole and real, was almost too much to process. "Benjamin," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. This is everything I've been afraid to hope for." He stepped closer, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch grounding her trembling excitement. "Then don't say anything yet," he murmured. "Just let it sink in, let yourself feel it. Because what I'm offering, it's us fully, with no pretenses, no borrowed identities, no doubts, just us." Emma's mind raced images of shared mornings, making coffee, lazy afternoons, rearranging pillows, evenings wrapped in quiet conversation and laughter flashing through her imagination. She felt the full weight of the proposal, not just a physical move into his penthouse, but an emotional leap into a life of shared vulnerability, trust, and belonging. Her chest tightened as she stepped into his embrace, the warmth of his body pressing against hers, steady and reassuring. "I want that," she whispered into his shirt. "I want us." Benjamin tilted his head, resting his forehead against hers, his dark eyes gleaming with intensity and affection. "Then it's settled," he said softly. "We belong together not because of status, not because of expectations, but because of us, because we choose each other. Every day, no matter what the world says." The room seemed to pause, in that instant the city outside fading into insignificance, as Emma felt the profound certainty of his words. The magnitude of it, the recognition, the choice, the vulnerability settled over her in waves, leaving her both breathless and exhilarated. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with tears in her eyes, and he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that lit every corner of his face with joy and tenderness. "So you're really saying, we're doing this?" she asked, the edges of her voice trembling between excitement and fear. "We are," Benjamin confirmed, voice firm, filled with warmth. "Every meal, every quiet morning, every messy, wonderful, ordinary day. Together, as partners, as equals, as us." Emma laughed softly through tears, the sound vibrating with relief, happiness, and a kind of reverent awe. She felt a surge of love, recognition, and acceptance, a feeling so complete it was almost dizzying. This wasn't just a proposal to move in. It was a declaration of trust, devotion, and a life chosen deliberately together. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him, feeling the solidity of his presence, the rhythm of his heartbeat, and the steady assurance that they were embarking on something profoundly real. "Then let's do it," she whispered, resting her head against his chest. "Let's live our life, together." Benjamin pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, holding her close, a quiet promise imbued with depth and permanence. Together, he echoed, letting the word linger in the space between them, heavy with meaning and hope. In that shared moment, every fear, every doubt, and every whispered judgment from the outside world seemed to dissolve. They were no longer two individuals navigating separate realities. They were a united force, ready to embrace the extraordinary beauty of everyday life, hand in hand, heart with heart. The city lights shimmered through the windows, reflecting the possibilities of a life chosen freely, fiercely, and together. And as Emma Larson exhaled, fully sinking into the warmth of Benjamin Clark's embrace, she realized that finally she had found a place where she belonged, not because of grandeur or circumstance, but because of love, trust, and the courage to leap into the unknown together. The morning light spilled lazily across the penthouse living room, dancing on the polished wooden floors and bouncing off the tall windows that framed the city skyline. Emma Larson stretched, savoring the soft warmth of the sun on her face. She yawned, letting herself revel in the rare sensation of uninterrupted calm, a luxury she hadn't realized she craved so deeply. Benjamin Clark emerged from the kitchen, shirt slightly rumpled, hair tousled from sleep, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The aroma enveloped Emma, mingling with the faint scent of the vanilla candle she had lit the night before. He handed her a mug with a small, teasing smile. "Morning," he said, simply the word carrying a weight of comfort that made her chest tighten. "Morning," she replied, taking the mug, letting the warmth seep into her palms. She watched him settle beside her on the couch, legs stretched out, the ease of his posture reflecting a sense of security that had become surprisingly familiar in just a few weeks. They sipped in companionable silence for a few moments, listening to the hum of the city below. For Emma, it was astonishing how extraordinary ordinary moments could feel when shared with someone who truly saw you. The coffee, the sunlight, the quiet apartment, simple things that had never seemed remarkable before, now carried a richness she couldn't articulate. Later they ventured out for a casual stroll, wandering through the small shops and local markets nestled in quiet city streets. Emma carried a tote bag filled with small finds, an art print she had loved, a journal with a whimsical cover, and a pair of throw pillows that made Benjamin groan playfully. "You really do have a thing for ridiculous home accents," he remarked, but his tone was affectionate, not reproachful. "They're necessary," Emma said with a laugh, her eyes bright, "for warmth, personality, comfort. They make a house a home." Benjamin shook his head, smiling, and slipped his hand into hers as they continued walking. The connection was seamless, effortless, a gentle reminder that life was richer when shared. Passers-by glanced curiously at them, but Emma no longer felt the sting of judgment. With Benjamin at her side, the opinions of strangers felt distant, irrelevant. Evenings became a series of small rituals, each imbued with intimacy and shared joy. They cooked together, sometimes messily laughing when pancakes were slightly burned or when a recipe went awry. Music played softly in the background, a soundtrack to ordinary magic. They lingered over dinners, talking about dreams, fears, and the absurdities of the world outside. In these moments, Emma felt fully present, fully seen, and fully at home. One afternoon, they visited a local gallery, wandering slowly from piece to piece. Benjamin's questions were thoughtful, his attention genuine, and Emma found herself explaining techniques and emotions behind each work with ease, unburdened by fear of judgment. He listened attentively, occasionally reaching for her hand, grounding her with the simple weight of his presence. "Emma," he said, softly, stopping in front of a landscape painting that captured the subtle hues of a fading sunset. "You know what I love about these moments?" What she asked, curiosity flickering in her tone. "It's real," he replied, eyes meeting hers. "No scripts, no headlines, no expectations. Just us sharing a world we're building together. And it's beautiful because it's ours." Emma's chest swelled with a quiet, profound happiness. The city outside could be chaotic, unkind, and unforgiving, but here in this shared space, life felt balanced, grounded, and deeply satisfying. She realized that the fairy tale she had imagined, the one she had thought existed only in books or films, wasn't defined by grandeur or opulence. It was defined by trust, shared laughter, and a partnership where each person felt valued and understood. At night, they would curl up on the couch, pillows and blankets strewn around them, reading, talking, or simply sitting in the comfort of silence. Emma traced patterns on Benjamin's arm, absent-mindedly, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips. Each beat was a reminder of safety, belonging, and the extraordinary stability of love earned through vulnerability. They also navigated the external world with grace. Occasional whispers, curious glances, and subtle gossip no longer had the power to unsettle Emma. Benjamin's steadfast support, combined with the quiet pride he showed in their relationship, created an unspoken shield around them. She found herself walking a little taller, speaking with more confidence, and trusting in the integrity of their connection. The mini-climax of this period of their life emerged not through drama, but through recognition. Emma realized as she leaned against Benjamin's shoulder during a quiet evening, the city lights sparkling through the windows like distant stars, that they had created something enduring. Not a perfect life, not a life without obstacles, but a life that was theirs, filled with laughter, warmth, and a profound sense of belonging. Benjamin kissed the top of her head gently. "We're doing this right," he whispered. Every day, small moments, big moments, together. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words settle deeply within her. The stress, the scrutiny, the chaos of the outside world, they no longer mattered. What mattered was the present, the life they were building, and the quiet, unwavering joy of being fully known and fully accepted. And in that ordinary, extraordinary moment, Emma Larson understood what it meant to live a real-life fairy tale, not one of borrowed grandeur or imagined perfection, but one of authenticity, partnership, and love that endured beyond appearances. Sunlight spilled gently through the tall windows of Emma Larson and Benjamin Clark's shared apartment, painting the room in warm, golden hues. The city outside carried on its relentless rhythm, taxis, honking pedestrians weaving through the streets, and distant sirens marking the heartbeat of urban life. Yet inside the world felt still intimate, a sanctuary shaped by laughter, shared meals, and quiet conversations that had become their daily rhythm. Emma sat cross-legged on the couch, a cup of coffee warming her hands, glancing across at Benjamin as he flipped through a sketchbook she had brought home. The simple sound of pages, turning the quiet hum of their apartment, and the occasional laughter breaking through the morning calm, created a kind of rhythm that felt sacred. For months, the chaos of public scrutiny, headlines, and whispered judgments had threatened to overshadow every moment, yet here they were grounded in each other, finding comfort in the ordinary. Benjamin looked up from the sketchbook, his gaze soft but intent. "You've really built yourself a life here," he said, nodding toward her small arrangement of art supplies, sketches, and carefully chosen decorations. "It's uniquely you." Emma smiled, a little wistful. "It took time, and some courage, to carve out a space that felt like me, even with the world watching." He reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "That courage," he said quietly, "is one of the many things that made me fall for you." She felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just his words, it was the weight behind them, the acknowledgement that their love was rooted in truth, vulnerability, and authenticity. No borrowed dresses, no pretense, no expectations from the outside world, just two people who had dared to see each other clearly and accept what they saw. Emma leaned back against him, their shoulders touching, the simple intimacy grounding her. She thought back to the evening that had started it all, the borrowed emerald dress, the unfamiliar ballroom, and the whirlwind of nerves and excitement that had pushed her into a world she thought she didn't belong to. And yet from that single act of courage and generosity, stepping into her friend's role had blossomed a connection that neither she nor Benjamin could have anticipated. The reflection made her laugh softly. "Who would have thought," she murmured, "that one borrowed dress could lead to all of this?" Benjamin smiled, brushing a kiss across her temple. "Life has a funny way of arranging things," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Sometimes the smallest acts, the tiniest decisions create the biggest changes. That dress, that night, it brought me to you." Emma closed her eyes, letting herself soak in the sentiment, the truth of it striking deeper than any grand gesture ever could. The world could continue to judge, to gossip, to speculate, but inside these walls, inside this life they had built together, none of that mattered. They had chosen each other repeatedly, in ways both monumental and mundane. Their days settled into a comforting pattern, slow mornings over coffee and toast weekends, exploring local art galleries or wandering through farmers' markets, evenings spent cooking, attempting new recipes, or simply sitting on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. Every ordinary moment felt extraordinary because it was shared, because it was theirs, and because they had earned the trust and understanding that made even small gestures significant. Emma reflected on how much she had grown, not just in confidence, but in understanding what it meant to embrace life fully, with courage and authenticity. She had learned to trust herself, to value her own worth, and to step into spaces she had once considered intimidating, not as an imposter, but as someone who belonged. And in doing so, she had discovered that love, genuine love, was built on honesty, vulnerability, and the bravery to reveal oneself completely. Benjamin's presence beside her was a constant, a steady affirmation that life could be both exciting and serene, chaotic and safe. He didn't just admire her strength and talent, he respected her humanity, her imperfections, her fears, and her dreams. And in that mutual respect and adoration, Emma found a profound sense of peace. As they sipped their coffee in comfortable silence, Emma let herself envision the future. A life marked not by headlines or wealth, but by shared mornings, whispered conversations, laughter spilling into quiet rooms, and the unspoken understanding that no matter what the outside world might say, they had chosen each other. And that choice, that deliberate, fearless embrace of love and life, was what made everything real. She glanced at Benjamin, his eyes catching hers, and felt a surge of warmth and gratitude. The journey from uncertainty to this shared sanctuary had not been easy, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and vulnerability, but every challenge had strengthened the bond between them. Every whispered worry, every cautious step toward honesty, had culminated in a love that was unshakable. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Emma smiled at the irony. It had all started with a borrowed dress, a role she had stepped into out of kindness, and had led her here to him, to a love that was real, lasting, and profoundly human. The twist of fate, the unpredictable course of life had revealed that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most profound consequences. Benjamin reached out, taking her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "We've built something remarkable," he said softly. "Not because the world demands it, not because it's expected, but because we dared to be ourselves. And that's why it will last." Emma leaned into him, feeling the rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek. "I never imagined this kind of love," she whispered. "So patient, so grounded, so real." He kissed her hair gently, a soft affirmation of all that had passed and all that lay ahead. "It's ours," he said. "Built from courage, honesty, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. And it starts every day just like this." Emma closed her eyes, letting the moment settle fully into her heart. The city hummed quietly below the outside world, continuing its unceasing pace, but in their shared space, time slowed. The borrowed dress, the mistaken identity, the whirlwind of the first encounter, it all seemed distant yet essential. Without it, they would never have found the path that led to this love, resilient, patient, joyful, and unwavering. And as the sunlight continued to filter through the windows, warming the room with its gentle embrace, Emma Larson allowed herself to simply exist here now, in the extraordinary ordinariness of a life shared with Benjamin Clark. It was a love that had begun unexpectedly, nurtured carefully, and blossomed fully. A love that promised to endure ordinary days and extraordinary moments alike. Sometimes healing begins where we least expect it, hidden in moments of courage we never thought we had, or in the quiet choice to be honest, even when fear tells us to hide. Emma's story reminds us that life doesn't always follow the neat lines we imagine, and that the most extraordinary connections often start in the most ordinary, unexpected ways. A borrowed dress, a small act of bravery, or a single step into someone else's world can open doors to truths about ourselves and the love we are capable of giving and receiving. What matters most is authenticity, showing up as we truly are with all our flaws, fears, and dreams intact. It's in these moments of vulnerability that we find strength, and in this strength we discover the capacity to form bonds that are real, enduring, and transformative. Love, trust, and connection are not measured by grandeur or circumstance, but by the courage to be seen and to see others fully and without pretense. So when the world feels overwhelming or uncertain, remember that taking a chance, being honest, and stepping fully into your own life can lead to moments of unexpected magic, moments that leave your heart lighter, fuller, and quietly profoundly healed. Thank you for being here with us. Every story we share is meant to touch hearts, spark reflection, and remind us of the quiet courage and beauty in everyday life. Your presence, your attention, and your willingness to feel alongside us mean more than words can say. Every like, share, and subscribe helps us tell more stories that touch the soul, spread empathy, and celebrate the humanity in each of us. We're grateful to have you as part of this journey. Thank you for letting these stories into your world.